The command deck of the Arakan flagship pulsed with activity. Holographic displays flickered across the curved walls, projecting a three-dimensional map of the disputed sector. Countless dots representing warships from both the Arakan Alliance and the Phi-6 Federation converged around a single point, the resource-rich planet Veraxis 4. Commander Sereth stood with his arms crossed, his four-fingered hands gripping the sleeves of his metallic uniform. The violet scales on his face reflected the blue glow of the tactical display. His yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the movements of the enemy fleet. "Status report," he commanded, his deep voice carrying across the deck despite its low volume. A younger officer approached, saluting with a closed fist across his chest. The Phi-6 have deployed their 7th fleet to the neutral zone. They're positioning mining platforms around the northern continent of Veraxis 4. Sereth's jaw tightened. "They're testing our resolve. The Galactic Council has designated that region as a buffer zone. No extraction is permitted without bilateral agreement." "Commander," the communications officer interrupted, "we've received word from High Command. The Galactic Council is dispatching observers to monitor the situation." "Observers?" Sereth's crest of scales along his skull ridge lifted slightly, a sign of irritation in Arakan body language. "While the Phi-6 violate our sovereignty, the Council sends watchers instead of enforcers." The tactical officer cleared his throat. "Sir, the diplomatic vessel has just entered our sector. They request permission to dock." A heavy silence fell over the command deck. The Arakan Alliance had suffered greatly during the Targon conflict 30 cycles ago, a war that had begun when Arakan negotiators had been too trusting of diplomatic observers who had turned out to be covert operatives. "Permission granted," Sereth finally said, "but implement Security Protocol Delta 9. No access to sensitive areas, no weapons, and continuous surveillance." "Understood, Commander. The delegation will arrive at Docking Bay 4 in approximately 20 minutes. Sereth nodded curtly. "I'll greet them personally. Lieutenant Voss, you have the bridge." As he strode through the corridors of the massive warship, Sereth mentally prepared himself for the diplomatic dance that was to come. The Phi-6 were cunning negotiators who had repeatedly exploited loopholes in past agreements. They coveted the rare minerals of Veraxis 4, elements crucial for advanced propulsion systems and energy weapons. Whoever controlled those resources would gain significant military advantage in this quadrant of the galaxy. When he reached the docking bay, Sereth was surprised to find only a single small vessel attached to the magnetic clamps, vastly different from the usual grand diplomatic vessels used by council representatives. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Sereth expected to see a full delegation of various species, but instead, only a single figure emerged. A human. She was of average height for her species, with dark hair pulled back in a practical style. Her attire was simple, a charcoal gray uniform with subtle blue council insignia. She carried a small case, presumably containing personal items and diplomatic credentials. "Commander Sereth?" She extended her hand in the human greeting custom. "I'm Elena Carter, Galactic Council Observer for the Veraxis situation." Sereth reluctantly touched his palm to hers, noting the strange warmth and softness of human skin. "You're alone?" The Council typically sends a full delegation for potential conflict zones. A slight smile touched her lips. The Council determined that a single observer would be less intrusive during sensitive negotiations. "My role is purely observational." "Of course," Sereth replied, making little effort to hide his skepticism. Humans were relative newcomers to galactic politics, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 70 years prior. Their homeworld, Earth, was on the galactic periphery, far from the centers of power. Why would the Council send an inexperienced species to observe a potential flashpoint? "I've arranged quarters for you," he continued, gesturing toward the corridor. "A security officer will escort you and explain the areas that are off-limits." "Thank you, Commander." Her voice was steady, professional. "I understand your security concerns and will respect them. However, I would appreciate access to cultural and historical databases. To be an effective observer, I need to understand context. Sareth studied her for a moment. There was something in her eyes, a sharpness, an attention to detail that made him uneasy. Limited access will be granted. Lieutenant Mira will show you to your quarters and provide you with the necessary clearances. As they walked through the corridors, Sareth noticed how the human observed everything, the architectural details of the ship, the interaction patterns of passing crew members, even the script on the directional signs. Nothing seemed to escape her attention. "This is your first time aboard an Arakin vessel?" he asked, breaking the silence. "It is," she confirmed, "though I've studied your ship designs extensively. The Arakin preference for curved interiors with gravitational optimization is fascinating, quite different from the angular efficiency of human vessels." Sareth was surprised by her knowledge. "You've done your research." "It's my job to understand," she replied simply. They reached her assigned quarters, a modest but comfortable room near the diplomatic section of the ship. Lieutenant Mira, a female Arakin with lighter-colored scales, took over escort duties. "If you need anything, Lieutenant Mira will assist you," Sareth said formally. "The first negotiation session with the Physics begins in 3 hours. You'll be notified when to attend." Elena nodded. "Thank you, Commander. I look forward to observing the proceedings." As Sareth walked away, he couldn't shake a nagging feeling that there was more to this human observer than met the eye. A species that had barely mastered interstellar travel was hardly qualified to mediate a dispute between civilizations thousands of years more advanced. Why would the Council choose a human? And why send only one? The answer, he suspected, would reveal itself soon enough. Until then, he would watch Elena Carter as carefully as she seemed to be watching everything else. Back on the command deck, Sareth reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The Physics delegation had arrived at the neutral meeting station position between the two fleets. Their diplomatic vessel was significantly larger, carrying at least 20 representatives. "Typical Physics pageantry," muttered Sareth's second-in-command, Commander Laris. "They always bring an entourage to intimidate." "Numbers don't win negotiations," Sareth replied. "Leverage does. And right now, we hold position over the richest veins of stellium on the planet." Lieutenant Voss approached with a datapad. "Sir, our intelligence division reports unusual activity in the human observer's quarters. She's been accessing historical archives, specifically records of previous Arakin Physics conflicts and territorial disputes." Sareth frowned. "Is that within her granted access level?" "Yes, Commander, but the pattern of her inquiries is systematic, almost as if she's looking for something specific." "Keep monitoring her activities," Sareth ordered. "She's supposed to be a passive observer, not conducting research. What is she looking for that the Council doesn't already know?" "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Physics Command. They're requesting to move the first negotiation session forward by 1 hour." "Try to throw us off balance," Sareth growled. "Confirm the new time. We won't give them the satisfaction of appearing unprepared." As the crew hurried to prepare for the accelerated schedule, Sareth's thoughts returned to Elena Carter. Why would a simple observer need to delve so deeply into historical records? What was her true purpose here? Somewhere in the depths of his mind, old suspicions began to surface. The last time the Arakin had trusted too quickly, they had suffered devastating losses. He would not make the same mistake twice. The negotiation chamber aboard the neutral station was a perfect circle designed to eliminate any symbolic advantage in seating arrangements. The Arakin delegation sat on one side, the Physics on the other, with a small section reserved for Council observers. Elena Carter sat alone in the observer section, a datapad in her hands. She appeared to be taking notes, her expression neutral as she watched the proceedings unfold. Governor Telsic of the Physics Federation spoke first, his translucent skin shifting through patterns of blue and green. Emotional signals that most species couldn't interpret, but which Sareth had learned to read through years of confrontation. The Physics Federation has historical claims to Varaxis dating back 3 millennia. Telsic stated, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence. "Our ancestors established the first outposts on the southern continent. The minerals we extract are vital to our civilization's energy needs. Sareth leaned forward. Historical claims mean little when you abandon those outposts 800 years ago. The Arakan Alliance has maintained continuous presence in the system for the past 5 centuries. The Neutral Zone Agreement was established with clear boundaries that your mining operations have repeatedly violated. The negotiation quickly devolved into a tense exchange of accusations and counteraccusations. The Physics claimed resource scarcity forced them to expand operations. The Arakan accused them of deliberate provocation. Throughout it all, Elena Carter remained silent, her eyes moving between speakers, occasionally making notes. Sareth caught her gaze once, thoughtful, analytical, revealing nothing of her own position. After 3 hours of fruitless debate, both sides agreed to adjourn until the following day. As the delegations filed out, Sareth noticed Elena lingering, reviewing something on her datapad. "Did you find our diplomatic approach lacking, Observer Carter?" he asked, approaching her. She looked up, seemingly unsurprised by his presence. "Not at all, Commander." Both sides presented their positions forcefully. "Yet you took extensive notes. What exactly will you be reporting to the Council?" Her expression remained carefully neutral. "My observations are preliminary. This is a complex situation with deep historical roots. I'm still gathering context." "Context," Sareth repeated. "Is that why you've been accessing our historical archives?" "To gather context." A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed her face before she composed herself. "As I mentioned earlier, understanding the cultural and historical background is essential to my role." "Your role as a passive observer?" "No observation is truly passive, Commander," she replied. "To observe effectively, one must understand what one is seeing." Sareth stepped closer. "Let me be direct, Observer Carter. The last time the Arakan trusted Council observers, we discovered too late they were gathering intelligence for our enemies. I won't allow that to happen again." "I understand your concern," she said evenly. "The Targon conflict was a devastating betrayal of trust. But I assure you, my purpose here is exactly as stated." The fact that she knew about the Targon conflict, a painful chapter in Arakan history that wasn't widely discussed, only heightened Sareth's suspicion. "We shall see," he said, turning to leave. "Remember that while you observe us, we are also observing you." As he walked away, Sareth tapped his communication device. "Security, I want you to increase surveillance on the human observer. Monitor all her communications and database access. Something doesn't feel right." When he returned to his flagship, an urgent message awaited him from Arakan High Command. The Physics had deployed additional warships to the sector, bringing their total force to nearly double what had been reported earlier. They were positioning for a potential offensive. "They negotiate with words while preparing for war," Sareth muttered, studying the updated tactical display. "Typical Physics deception." "Commander," Lieutenant Voss reported, "General Rollark has sent instructions from Central Command. He recommends we move our heavy cruisers into defensive position around Varaxis for immediately." Sareth hesitated. General Rollark was a respected military leader, but he had always favored aggressive tactics. Moving the cruisers now would be seen as escalation, exactly what the Physics might be hoping for to justify their own military buildup. "Hold position for now," Sareth ordered, "but prepare the fleet for rapid deployment. I want to see how the negotiations progress tomorrow before we make any moves that could be interpreted as hostile." "Sir," Voss replied, clearly uncomfortable with the decision. General Rollark was quite insistent. "He claims to have intelligence that the Physics are planning a surprise attack. And, conveniently, he's suggesting we move first," Sareth observed. "No, Lieutenant. We will be prepared but patient. The Alliance doesn't start wars. We finish them if necessary." As the day's cycle ended and the ship's lighting dimmed to simulate night, Sareth found himself unable to rest. The situation was balanced on a knife's edge. The slightest miscalculation could plunge 2 civilizations into war. His personal communication device chimed softly. A message from a security chief, Observer Carter has requested access to legal databases containing Arakin military protocols and galactic law regarding contested territories. Sareth frowned. What game was this human playing? Such information went far beyond what a passive observer would need. Tomorrow, he decided, he would confront her directly about her true purpose here. What he didn't know was that events were already in motion that would force his hand much sooner than he anticipated. The mood in the negotiation chamber the following day was noticeably more tense. The Phi-6 delegation had grown by several members, now including military advisors in their distinctive silver uniforms. Sareth had brought his own tactical officer, but otherwise kept his team small. Showing up with military personnel would only escalate tensions further. Elena Carter was already in her seat when the Arakin delegation arrived. She nodded politely to Sareth, but remained focused on her datapad. Governor Telsic opened the session with what could only be described as a veiled threat. The Phi-6 Federation has shown remarkable restraint thus far. However, we cannot allow the Arakin alliance to monopolize resources that are vital to regional stability. Restraint, Sareth replied incredulously. Your fleet movements suggest otherwise, Governor. You've positioned warships within strike distance of our outposts. A necessary precaution given your own military buildup, Telsic countered. This is absurd, Sareth growled. We've maintained our original position. It is the Phi-6 who have doubled their military presence. The debate grew increasingly heated. Accusations flew back and forth, with neither side willing to yield ground. Throughout it all, Elena Carter observed silently, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. Then, unexpectedly, Governor Telsic delivered what amounted to an ultimatum. The Phi-6 Federation demands Arakin withdrawal from 60% of the current neutral zone, including the northern continent of Veraxis 4. Failure to comply within 48 hours will be considered a hostile act, warranting appropriate response. The chamber erupted in outrage from the Arakin delegation. Sareth rose to his feet, his scales darkening with anger, a physiological response he couldn't control. This is not negotiation, he declared. This is coercion. The Arakin alliance rejects your ultimatum entirely. As heated exchanges continued, Sareth noticed Elena Carter quietly leaving her seat. She approached one of the Phi-6 military advisors and whispered something to him. The advisor appeared startled, then concerned, glancing nervously at Telsic. What was she doing? Observers were not supposed to engage directly with either party during formal negotiations. Before Sareth could intervene, his communication device vibrated urgently. A priority message from his flagship. Commander, we've detected unusual communications between General Rollark's staff and an unknown frequency originating from Phi-6 territory. Encryption suggests it's unofficial communication. Sareth's blood ran cold. Unofficial communications between an Arakin general and the Phi-6? That bordered on treason. The session adjourned in disarray, with both sides retreating to consult with their respective commands. As Sareth prepared to return to his ship, Elena Carter approached him. Commander, may I speak with you privately? She asked, her voice low and urgent. Part of him wanted to refuse, to maintain distance from this increasingly suspicious human. But curiosity won out. Briefly, he agreed. She led him to a small, empty conference room off the main corridor. After verifying they were alone, she spoke quickly and directly. There's a conspiracy unfolding, Commander. Elements within both the Arakin Alliance and the Phi-6 Federation are working together to engineer a conflict. Sareth stared at her in disbelief. That's a serious accusation. What evidence do you have? This, she said, sliding a small data crystal across the table. Financial transactions between a military technology consortium and high-ranking officials on both sides, including your General Rollark. The consortium stand to profit enormously from a full-scale war. Sareth picked up the crystal cautiously. How did you obtain this? That's not important right now, she replied. What matters is that both your people and the Phi-6 are being manipulated into a conflict that benefits neither civilization. And I'm supposed to trust you? Sareth asked. A human observer who has been accessing restricted information since her arrival? Elena's expression hardened. I understand your skepticism, Commander. But ask yourself, why would the Phaeax escalate so dramatically when negotiations were still ongoing? Why would General Rollark push for military positioning that would almost certainly trigger a Phaeax response? Sareth had been asking himself those same questions. The timing had seemed off, the escalation too convenient. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, then General Rollark is committing treason against the Alliance. And several high-ranking Phaeax officials are doing the same to their government, Elena added. The evidence is all there on the crystal. But we need to act quickly before either side makes an irreversible move. Sareth studied the human carefully. Everything about her presence had seemed suspicious from the beginning. Yet now she was offering information that could prevent a catastrophic war, if it was legitimate. I'll review this evidence, he said finally. But if this is some kind of manipulation, it's not, she assured him. And, Commander, be careful who you trust with this information. The conspiracy extends further than you might think. Back aboard his flagship, Sareth retreated to his private quarters to review the contents of the data crystal. What he found shocked him to his core. The crystal contained detailed records of communications between General Rollark and a Phaeax military faction led by Admiral Krev. They had been in contact for months, coordinating a strategy to provoke conflict between their governments. Behind them both was a shadowy consortium called Nexar Industries, a major weapons manufacturer with interests throughout the sector. Their plan was elegant in its simplicity: push both governments to the brink of war, then profit from the ensuing arms race and reconstruction contracts afterward. General Rollark's insistence on aggressive positioning suddenly made sense. He was deliberately trying to provoke the Phaeax. Sareth's first instinct was to contact Erican High Command directly, but Elena's warning echoed in his mind. Be careful who you trust. If Rollark had co-conspirators at higher levels, alerting the wrong person could be disastrous. A priority alert interrupted his thoughts. A message from the bridge. Commander, Phaeax warships have begun moving toward the neutral zone. They'll cross the boundary in approximately 6 hours. The situation was deteriorating faster than he had anticipated. Sareth needed to act, but without triggering the very conflict he was trying to prevent. He made his decision. Assemble the senior staff in the secure briefing room, and request Observer Carter's presence as well. If this human had more information about the conspiracy, he needed to hear it. The fate of 2 civilizations might depend on it. When Elena arrived at the briefing room, Sareth noticed a subtle change in her demeanor. Her observer's neutrality had given way to a more purposeful presence. The evidence is genuine, Sareth said without preamble. General Rollark has been conspiring with elements of the Phaeax military. But I need to know how you obtained this information. No ordinary observer would have access to encrypted communications at this level. Elena met his gaze steadily. You're right, Commander. I'm not an ordinary observer. A hush fell over the assembled officers. I hold the position of Special Envoy within the Galactic Council, with authority to prevent unauthorized conflict between member species. My observer status was a cover to allow me to investigate suspicions of conspiracy without alerting the conspirators. Sareth's scales rippled with surprise. The Council sent a human for this? Precisely because I am human, Elena explained. Our species is still considered relatively unimportant in galactic politics. No one would suspect a human of wielding significant council authority. It made me the perfect investigator. So you've been spying on us from the beginning, Sareth said, his voice hardening. Not spying, Commander. Investigating. There's a difference. I wasn't gathering intelligence for any government. I was identifying those who seek to profit from war and death. One of Sareth's officers spoke up. If what she's saying is true, we need to alert High Command immediately about General Rollark's treason and risk tipping off his allies. Elena countered. We need to be strategic. The Phaeax warships are advancing because they received intelligence, likely from Rollark, that you were planning a preemptive strike. Which we weren't, Sareth said. Exactly. So we need to convince them of that fact before shooting starts. Sareth considered their options. What do you propose? An emergency session of the Galactic Council, Elena said. I can use my authority to summon both delegations. There, I'll present the evidence of conspiracy. Evidence that neither government can ignore without appearing complicit. And if they do ignore it, Sareth asked, then I am authorized to call for council sanctions against both parties, Elena replied, her voice taking on a new authority. The council can impose trade restrictions, technology embargoes, even military intervention if necessary. Sareth studied her carefully. This human, whom he had dismissed as inconsequential, now revealed herself to be one of the most powerful individuals in the sector. The irony wasn't lost on him. Very well, he said finally. Arrange your emergency session. In the meantime, I'll prepare defensive positions only. We won't fire first, but we'll be ready if the Physics don't heed the council's call. Elena nodded. Thank you, Commander. Sometimes the most courageous act in war is choosing not to fight one. As she left to make the necessary arrangements, Sareth wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his career or preventing the biggest tragedy in recent galactic history. The emergency council session was convened within hours. Representatives from both the Arakin Alliance and the Physics Federation arrived, clearly surprised by the sudden summons. General Rollark himself appeared via holographic projection, as did several high-ranking Physics officials. The council chamber was imposing, a vast circular space with tiered seating representing the hundreds of species that made up the galactic community. At the center stood a speaker's podium, currently occupied by distinguished Moravian, the council's current chair. This emergency session has been called by Special Envoy Elena Carter to address a matter of grave concern regarding the Varaxis dispute, the chair announced. Envoy Carter, you have the floor. Elena stepped forward, no longer the quiet observer, but a figure of authority. Sareth, watching from the Arakin section, barely recognized her as the same person who had stepped aboard his ship just days earlier. Distinguished representatives of the council, she began. I come before you with evidence of a conspiracy that threatens not only peace in the Varaxis sector, but the integrity of our galactic community. She activated a holographic display that filled the chamber with images, documents, and communication logs, all implicating General Rollark, Admiral Krev, and several other officials from both sides. What you are seeing is proof of collusion between military leaders of both the Arakin Alliance and the Physics Federation. These individuals have been working with a weapons consortium called Nexar Industries to engineer a conflict from which all three parties would profit. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. General Rollark's holographic image showed rage, while the Physics officials looked stunned. This is slander, Rollark shouted. Commander Sareth, are you allowing this human to make such accusations against Arakin leadership? Sareth rose to his feet. The evidence speaks for itself, General. Financial transactions, encrypted communications, all pointing to a deliberate attempt to push our civilizations into war. Elena continued, her voice cutting through the chaos. For months, these conspirators have manipulated information, staged provocations, and undermined diplomatic efforts. They created the illusion that both sides were escalating, when in reality, the escalation was orchestrated by a few individuals seeking profit. The Physics Governor Telsic stood, his skin now pale with shock. If these accusations are true, then Admiral Krev has committed high treason against the Federation. But how can we verify this evidence? The Council's Security Division has already authenticated all documents, Elena replied. Additionally, we have testimony from insiders within Nexar Industries who became concerned about the plot. General Rollark's holographic image suddenly vanished. He had terminated the connection. Moments later, Sareth received an urgent communication from his flagship. Commander, General Rollark has ordered his personal battle group to advance on Varaxis 4, overriding the chain of command. Sareth immediately addressed the council. Rollark is attempting to force conflict despite being exposed. I request emergency authorization to detain him and take command of all Arakin forces in the sector. The council chair nodded gravely. Granted, Commander. And the Phi-6 delegation, Governor Telsic, still visibly shaken, rose again. The Federation will immediately recall Admiral Krev and his supporters for investigation. We had no knowledge of this conspiracy. That may be true, Elena said, but your ultimatum pushed us to the brink of war. Was that your own decision, Governor, or were you also manipulated? Telsic's skin flushed dark blue, a sign of embarrassment in his species. I was advised that Arakin forces were planning to seize the northern continent. I see now that information came from Krev's office. Then perhaps, Elena suggested, the ultimatum should be withdrawn and genuine negotiations begun. The governor hesitated only briefly before nodding. The ultimatum is withdrawn. The Phi-6 Federation desires peace, not manufacture conflict. As the emergency session continued, Sareth coordinated with loyal Arakin officers to contain Roller's battle group. The general himself was placed under arrest when his command ship was surrounded by vessels loyal to high command. Within hours, the crisis that had seemed inevitable began to dissipate. The Phi-6 warships halted their advance and began withdrawing to their previous positions. The Arakin fleet maintained defensive positions but powered down weapons systems as a gesture of de-escalation. When Sareth finally returned to his flagship, he found Elena waiting in the docking bay. "You're leaving?" he asked, noticing her packed case. "My mission here is complete," she replied. "The Council will send a proper negotiation team to help both sides reach a fair agreement on Varaxis 4. Sareth struggled with what to say. This human had upended everything he thought he knew about the conflict, about council politics, about humans themselves. "You deceived me," he said finally. "I did," she acknowledged without apology. "But in doing so, I saved countless Arakin and Phi-6 lives. The question remains, why you? Why would the Council entrust such an important mission to a human?" Elena smiled slightly. "We humans have certain talents. We're adaptable. We notice patterns. We understand psychology across species because we've had to learn how to integrate into a galaxy that was already old when we arrived." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "And most importantly, Commander, we're underestimated. Just as you underestimated me from the moment I arrived." Sareth couldn't deny it. He had dismissed her as inconsequential, and in doing so, had missed the most important factor in the entire Varaxis situation. "Will your people be taking a larger role in the Council now?" he asked. "Perhaps," she said, "but that's for the Council to decide. My job was simply to prevent a war that neither side truly wanted." As she prepared to board her small vessel, Sareth found himself unexpectedly reluctant to see her leave. "Observer Carter," he called after her. She turned back. "Thank you," he said simply. Elena nodded. "The next time you meet a human diplomatic spectator, Commander, perhaps you'll pay closer attention." With that, she was gone, leaving Sareth to contemplate how profoundly his perspective had changed in just a few days. The formal negotiations that followed were productive in ways the initial sessions had not been. With the conspirators removed from both governments, genuine progress was made on resource-sharing agreements for Varaxis 4. The Arakin Alliance and the Phi-6 Federation agreed to joint development projects that would benefit both civilizations. In his final report to Arakin High Command, Sareth included a recommendation that future diplomatic teams include specialists in human psychology and negotiation techniques. If one human could so thoroughly change the course of an impending conflict, he reasoned, their species deserved far more attention than they had previously received. 3 cycles later, when news came that Earth had been granted a permanent seat on the Galactic Council Security Committee, Sareth was among the few Arakin who understood why. The species that had been dismissed as newcomers had proven themselves to be far more influential than anyone had anticipated. As for Elena Carter, rumors persisted that she had been dispatched to other trouble spots throughout the galaxy. Always as an observer, always underestimated, always more than she appeared to be. In diplomatic circles, a new saying began to circulate. "Watch the Watchers, especially if they're human." The human was supposed to be a diplomatic spectator. So why did the enemy surrender? Because sometimes The most powerful person in the room is the one no one notices until it's too late.